Hi, and welcome back to me sharing my Mach-E ownership experience. I got my Mustang Mach-E GT from a local dealer here in Michigan at the end of last year, so it was about December by the time that I had it with me. I had initially placed an order in August. The order kept getting pushed back, and when I found a local example that I was able to pick up at MSRP that was almost identical to what I had ordered anyway, I decided to pick it up and go for it. I had previously driven a Tesla Model 3 for about 50,000 miles, so I went through at least 2 winters with it, and I noticed very quickly with the Mach E that the winter performance, and I'm talking about performance in terms of how much power it's able to deliver, as well as the mileage that I was able to get out of it, were significantly worse. In order to test that theory, my wife and I picked out a destination that's a little bit north of here. It's about 70 miles there and 70 miles back. It's a shopping mall north of Detroit. And we took the Mach E on that road trip. Before we left, I started charging it to 100%. And by the time that we left, it was about 95%. And the estimated range on the car was 160 some miles. So for a road trip of 140 miles being a conservative estimate, I figured we would be good to go. Also, keep in mind that the vehicle is rated for 270 miles in total, and 140 miles shouldn't really challenge it too much, no matter what the outside temperature is, because that would almost be a 50% range drop. We started driving, and the speed limit in Michigan is 70 miles an hour on the highway, so people tend to typically go a little bit faster than that, maybe 75 miles an hour. And that's the speed that I was driving. The outside temperature was somewhere around 20 Fahrenheit or -7 C, and I was driving, as I said, probably 75 miles per hour or 120 kilometers an hour. We had the heat set to 64, which is 17 degrees C, and had it set to the low auto setting. I know that heat is one of the most critical factors when it comes to EV range, so we were starting to use the heated seats more. It has a heated steering wheel, so you can be pretty comfortable as long as you can get some form of heat going. The only thing that's going to get cold after a while is your feet. But we had reduced that in anticipation that going full blast on the heat wouldn't allow us to get the range that we needed. So we arrived, the guess-o-meter was pretty accurate, and we got there with 85 miles remaining. So, in theory, we should have been just fine to drive back after we were done shopping. The car sat in the parking lot, and after we got out of the first 2 stores, and it's an outdoor mall, so you have to drive from one store to another, we got back in the car, and the car had obviously started to cool down in that time. The battery also cooled down, which means that now the battery was showing about 10 to 15 miles less range than when we parked the car. That put us into a little bit of a tough situation because now it was 70 miles to get back, and the car was showing 70 miles exactly, and we weren't done yet. So we continued on with our day. Worst case, there would have probably been an EA charger that we could have stopped at on the way back, but we obviously wanted to avoid that if we possibly could because, again, 140 miles on a vehicle that's rated for 270 miles doesn't seem like a huge feat. So by the time that we got done shopping and we were ready to head back, the car had dropped another few miles, and we were now getting an estimated range that was below what we needed to get back home, which made things pretty uncomfortable on the way back. We turned off the heat. We reduced the speed to 65 miles an hour. As I was driving, I was playing with it and seeing how much of a range gain we could get by just going slower. 65 miles an hour is just over 100 kilometers, and it feels extremely slow, especially when cars are trying to pass you left and right. It's just not a super comfortable way to drive, especially in a car that's 500 horsepower and has a GT badge. In any case, we turned off the heat completely. We used the seat heaters and the heated steering wheel, and we're driving back, and what we noticed after maybe 20 minutes was that we were able to see our breath inside of the passenger cabin. I looked it up on Google because I wasn't sure what the temperature could have been, but it says that at about 45 degrees F, you start seeing your breath. And I would say that that's like 4 to 5 degrees Celsius. Um, Needless to say, my wife wasn't very happy about being in the car. Our feet got extremely cold. The heated seats only help so much. And you also have to consider, what if you were making this trip with kids? What if you had some passengers in the back seat? There would have been no way to keep them warm while keeping your range up because there's no heated seats in the back. And I don't think that most families would be happy to see their kids freeze in the back row. The heated steering wheel is good for the inside of your hand. If you're using Blue Cruise, then I guess technically you don't have to touch the steering wheel, but you will because you'll get so cold that you'll want to hold the steering wheel. Temperature side, the other really, really annoying factor was my feet and my wife's feet. We got very cold inside of the cabin, but it did do the trick. We ended up getting the range up to a point where we had 8% left when we got back home. The car was restricting power to a point that I hadn't previously experienced. It takes away power when it gets cold, but this was acceleration that was probably better in a Nissan Sentra. Overall, I'd say that that experiment showed the cold weather range isn't very good. I lost almost 50% of my range going a pretty typical speed for Michigan highways, and I wasn't excessively heating the cabin. I was just trying to be somewhat comfortable. This last week I called my dealer and told him what was going on with the car and that I was extremely disappointed with what we had experienced. According to him, there is currently a dealer installed software update that you can get for Job 1 cars, and it's a customer satisfaction update, which means that unless you ask for it, you're not really going to see it. So when I did ask, he showed me what the content was, and the content ended up being cold weather improvements, fast charging improvements, and it's an update that they would have probably installed for Job 1 cars when they come in for their first 10,000 mile service. And if you ask, then you will probably be able to get it sooner. The dealer that I bought the car from is a little bit further out, so I decided that if I was able to get the car into a dealer that was closer to us, then I would definitely prefer that instead of driving 45 minutes to go see him. So he said I should be able to call any dealer here in the area, and they will be able to install that very same update if I tell them what it is. So I called a couple of dealers around my office because I figured I'd drop it off, get one of my coworkers to pick me up, and then just pick it up the same afternoon because we're only doing a software update. There shouldn't be much to worry about. However, both of the dealers that I called only had one person that was qualified to work on a Mach-E, and that doesn't mean that they're qualified to work on a high voltage battery. That means for whatever they need to do on the car, there's one guy there that can do it. And apparently both of them were backed up for exactly the same time with 4 to 6 days, and neither one of them was able to offer me a loaner vehicle for the time where I had to drop my car off. So just to get a simple software update done, I would be without my car for almost up to a week, and I would have no loaner car from Ford. For most people, buying a Mach-E is going to one of the big three that they trust and that they have maybe known for years, and maybe they've always been driving a Ford or always been driving an American-made vehicle from one of the big three. And they expect a certain level of service, and I'm not sure how it is currently to get an ICE vehicle serviced, but the experience of getting the Mach-E taken care of within a Ford dealership, while it's still under warranty and almost a brand new car, was something that I was very surprised by. I thought that that's where the traditional automakers would excel, but it doesn't seem like they're really set up to deal with people that have questions about their car, that need service done to their car, or that the software updates that need to be installed at the dealer and can't be done over the air take 4 to 6 days. Now, I might be doing a more detailed video on this later, but here are some questions to think about if you're considering a Mach-E. The main consideration is going to be where you live and what the climate's like. If it gets cold, and it's cold for a significant number of months out of the year, you really need to consider if you're going to be okay with the range reduction, the comfort of your passengers, and if you're going to have performance at all times. Not all of these factors are important to everyone, but if you are considering, these are definitely things to think about. Thanks for watching, and until next time.